intermittent prolonged fasting. Okay, so we're going to discuss what the differences between those two. Number two, the science behind fasting and what happens to your body. And then number three, most important, is it right for you? Because truly I can tell you it is not right for everybody. Okay, we need to take certain things into consideration, and we're going to talk about that as well. First of all, we're going to cover time-restricted eating. So time-restricted eating, also known as TRE, it is basically, well, essentially, it is a type of a fasting, of an intermittent fasting. But what it does, it focuses a little bit more on when to eat rather than what to eat. It's kind of a little bit more popular because when we think about restricted eating, it just seems a little bit less scary than we use the expression fasting. Fasting can sound a little intimidating for some. Also, the time constraints of time restricted feeding vary anywhere from a 12-hour eating window, an 8-hour eating window, all the way to 4 hours. So 12-hour, let's say from 8 to 8, an 8-hour from 9 to 5, or a 4-hour, let's say we only eat from about 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. So these are the different types of time-restricted feedings, okay? It also refers to when eating is limited to a certain number of hours each day. So that's just another way of referring to that. And we're going to next talk about the time-restricted eating. I just wanted to go a little bit into some studies that have been done about time-restricted eating and how effective it really can be if this is something that is part of your regimen. So weight loss versus hormonal benefits. So time-restricting eating, according to researchers at one of the regulatory biology laboratory, it's at the Salk Institute for Biological Studies, it stated there that when we eat may be just as important or even more important than what we eat. So these guys from the Salk Institute, they're very big into time-restricted eating. And the following study that I'm just going to briefly talk about really proves how effective it is in that regard. So the study was with 2 sets of mice, which they shared the same genes, the same gender, same age, and they had a diet. They shared the same kind of diet that was compromising 60% of its calories from fat. Now just think about that. Every meal, potato chips, ice cream, for all your meals, very high in fat. So one group of mice, they would eat whenever they wanted. Okay, so what they would do, they would consume half of their food at night because mice are a primary nocturnal. So they would eat everything at night and then they kind of nibble throughout the rest of the day. And then the other group of mice was restricted to eating for 8 hours every night. Okay, so in that regard, they were fasting for about 16 hours per day. So there we had 2 controlled groups. They ate a standard diet compromising about 13% of calories from fat under similar conditions. Okay, so after 100 days, the mice who ate fatty food, frequently throughout the day, they gained the weight and developed high cholesterol, high blood glucose, liver damage, and also diminishing motor control. So while the mice that were in the time-restricted feeding group, they weighed 28% less, they showed no adverse health effect despite consuming the same number of calories from the same kind of fatty foods, okay? So that is kind of interesting. Now, considering all that, TRE, really the main goal of TRE seems to be more focused on weight loss and really reducing that overall caloric intake for that time period. It also focuses a little bit more on a flexible diet and kind of saying, you know what, I can just eat whatever I want as long as it is within that time window. And it also seems like that it encourages more the calorie restriction. So because of the less time we have, the less time window that we have for eating, so then less calories, right? So which I personally have a little bit of an issue with, because of I know that there is some scientific proof about restricted calories. We don't want to restrict calories too much, because there is, I found that study very, very interesting on time restricted eating, that when healthy adults limited their eating to about a 10-hour window, so it reduced the number of calories they ate day by day for about 20%. And then another study from the European Journal of Sports Science reported that another set of young adults that would eat 650 fewer calories per day when they limited their food intake to a 4-hour period. So to me, that seems a lot of calorie reduction. And so there is a downside. Okay, there is just a downside with all the restricted eating, which really, to me, does encourage more the caloric restriction. So that's where the difference a little bit comes in. Now, I'm not bashing any of any of those ways of fasting, time restricted eating, or the other one that we're going to discuss. So our next slide, I'm just going to make this a little bigger. Our next slide, now we're going to talk about the intermittent or prolonged fasting. Okay, so the difference here, our fasting window is 24 hours. That employs, it really does focus a little more on the longevity approach. It does encourage higher calories, so focusing more on hormones and fasting, using fasting as a catalyst. So it's also done intermittently. So we're focusing more, using it as a tool versus a restriction. And daily fasting really with this approach is not ideal. So you don't want to do this every day. You can do this once a week, or once in bi-weekly, or once a month. Focuses on elevating hormones through the fasting window. Okay, so now just very briefly, between the time restricted eating and the intermittent prolonged fasting, the difference really between the two is more of a verbal approach, as the benefits that you would receive from the TRE are those that you would also experience from fasting, for example, reducing insulin, increasing human growth hormone. However, the main goal of the TRE really seems to be focused on weight loss and also reducing overall caloric intake. And with intermittent prolonged fasting, there is more focus on the benefit of the fasting window, and again, what hormonal changes are occurring while we're fasting, and also what kind of neural healing effects, and also what kind of inflammatory and anti-inflammatory effects it has during the fasting period. So lots of good stuff. So again, with intermittent prolonged fasting, we're looking more into the longevity, where we can benefit from what is happening to the hormones, and using fasting as a catalyst to really get more out of your eating window, which is really going to enhance and the positive effects of what you're eating. So we're focusing on health, and we're using it as a tool to get a really nice metabolic effect, to get that autopsy, which is the basically the evaluation or the assessment that we want to get that stimulus that that we need, right? And also that growth hormone surge, that luteinizing hormone. You might have heard of the LH, also known as the lutrophin, which is a hormone produced by cells in the anterior pituitary glands. So just a little bit of history on that. So that is very, very powerful. So again, whereas daily fasting is not so ideal because it does restrict calories, which again, in turns restricts your metabolism. So intermittent fasting has a huge positive effect on your hormones. For a matter of fact, 2,000% increase in growth hormone, 67% increase in luteinizing hormones, which is being credited by the European Journal of the Endocrinology. So we're focusing on using those hormones through cells. And that's where we're going to go into our next slide, cells. So there's going to be some things happening in your body with your cells, which effect it has on your immune system, the glucose and glycogen effect on your body fat, the ketosis that is being created effect on mental state, the proteins that's effect on the brain, neurons effects on the brain, and the stress, which we're talking about a good stress effect on your energy. Okay, so now we're starting with the first part of this presentation, which are the cells. And you've probably seen this floating around the internet, but autophagy is where your cells create specific membrane, and those go out and hunt old, worn out and ruined cells that we really don't need anymore. So it's basically your body's cells recycling system. That is just so amazing. And it's one of the coolest things that our bodies have the capability of doing. It's just really, really awesome. So when we look at autophagy, the cells go out and they hunt old cells that don't need to be there anymore. And just think about it. This all happens during your 24-hour minimum, 24-hour fast. They eat those dead cells for energy. So when you're fasting and when you're not eating, your cells are eating old cells for energy. Now, this is really easily measured through autophagism. And we have more autophagism within our body when we are in a higher state of autophagy. And so we're recycling more cells, okay? So I hope you guys are bearing with me so far. We're in the cell department and we're talking about cannibalism. The cells are eating each other, but they're eating the dead ones to gain energy because you are in a fasting state, okay? So now that we talked about autophagy, the cells are just an amazing way in our system how it works while we're fasting. So the cells go out. Let's just go back quickly again. The cells go out, they hunt old cells that we don't need anymore. They gain that energy because we're fasting. Now, here is the cool thing with the autophagy. When it occurs in the liver, we also increase the lipolysis, which means we're improving fat burning lipolysis. That equals the utilization of fats for fuel, okay? So ultimately, we're turning it into an oxidization from where we are actually burning it. And that is where the liver comes in. So if we improve the efficiency of the liver during your fast by helping the autophagy, we're also improving fat burning. And that's just backed up by science. So don't get me wrong, just because intermittent or prolonged fasting is really good for overall longevity, that doesn't mean that it's not good for fat burning as well, like the time restricted eating that we're talking about in the beginning, okay? So the University of Southern California had a really, really cool study that they found. And then they said when you're fasting, you have a massive increase of stem cells. And it happens because you're killing off the old, dying white blood cells, and that forces the stem cell production to produce new white blood cells. And so what happens when we have new white blood cells, it attacks the so it attacks basically it strengthens your attack for disease, and that is what happens. It keeps your illnesses out. Okay, so the white blood cells, it turns the new white blood cells that attack disease. It is absolutely amazing all the things that are happening in our body while during that fasting period. So now there also was a study that took a look at the prolonged fasting, and what it found was that within a 24-hour time period of fasting, there was a 300% increase in autophagism. That is a huge, huge increase. So that brings us to our stem cells. Now, another study over at, again, at the USC found this really, really, really cool result. So, you heard about stem cells and what stem cells are doing. They create new cells in our body, and basically they stem cells. Now, when it comes down to our immune system, and it affects our immune system when we create new cells. If we can create, let's say we can create new immune cells, our body then can just be so ruthlessly efficient and staying healthy and really fighting off that illness. So additionally, fasting for 24 hours has a huge had a huge increase in decreasing, and that's where this right here, the bottom part here comes in, a huge increase in decreasing and down regulating what is known as a protein called PKA, which really, that is the one that needs to be turned down, or even turned off if we want to have a new stem cell production. So as we get older, we actually have more PKA, and that's why we produce less stem cells. And when you get kind of run down, or when you feel like you don't recover as fast anymore as when you were younger, and that is because that high elevation of PKA. So when we move on to our next slide, so fasting turns off PKA so that stem cells can be released again. And that is exactly what happens when you have that powerful, youthful feeling again, because that's what happens when you do that prolonged fasting. It really comes down to that rejuvenation, that longevity, and that feeling, really feeling young again. And it's really, really, truly amazing, because again, all this is happening while you are on an intermittent or prolonged fasting, minimum of 24 hours. So we're not talking about the TRE, the time restricted eating, because those specific components do not happen while we have time restricted eating. Yes, you do have the weight loss. Yes, you do have some growing, the growth hormones happening, but the real autophagy that is happening during that time does not happen with the TRE, but it does happen with your prolonged fasting, which would start with a 24-hour window. Now, our next slide, we're going to into glucose and glycogen. We're going to talk a little bit about that because it has an effect on it. So what actually happens with the sugar? On the first day of fasting, the body burns your stored sugar for energy. So it's going to go in that little storage right here. So every time you eat a meal, the energy goes into your liver and stores it in the form of glycogen. And so it takes about 10 to 12 hours before you deplete the glycogen stores in your liver. So if you eat 3 meals per day, you never really deplete your glycogen stores. Although possibly if you exercise, certain type of exercises will actually do that as well. So the biggest difference between time-restricted eating and prolonged fasting is complete glycogen exhaustion. That is what we're looking for. And once you deplete the glycogen stores in your liver, then you also start burning fats, okay? And you produce ketone bodies, and the ketone bodies are very, very good for your brain, okay? So when your stores are low and you haven't gotten that food for a while in your body, so it stops using a glucose to fuel just its basic needs, okay? So it's conserving it for energy, and your body and your brain will shift to ketosis, where it gets all of its energy from ketone bodies and from fat metabolism. So the ketones go up for our brain, and the ketones go up, which is really, really awesome for the brain and for the body. We want those ketones to rise, okay? So when that happens, we actually could have more energy when we're hungry, because your body wants you to focus on getting food, right? So your energy goes to getting food. Your brain has the energy to get focused on getting the food, and that is why so many people say they experience so much focus and energy when they are fasting. And so that brings us to our next subject, the proteins and the effect on the brain. Exercise and intermittent fasting both increase the production of proteins, and the proteins specifically that are called neurotrophic factors. So studies also have shown that these neurotrophic factors, and there is just like this one in particularly called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, they promote the growth of neurons. And this is so important because they promote the connection neurons, and they also strengthening the sinuses. So when this happens, little neuron circuits, like little sparks, are being activated, and then now the level of network traffic factors such as the BDNF increases. It goes up. So this process of increased BDNF will also increase the number of the mitochondria in your nerve cells. Again, absolutely fascinating, right? So this is like a brain fertilizer. It feeds your brain. It helps the brain to grow. And also we have that increase in synaptic plasticity. And so the way our neurons work in our brain is that they have synapses, and that's the connection between two neurons. So if you have more synaptic plasticity, it means the brain can communicate just a little bit better than the other brain cells, but also to the body. And that now brings us to the next subject, which is the stress and what effect it has on the energy. So now, of course, that there is an increase of stress tolerance, but this is actually not a bad thing. While fasting really promotes a mild energetic stress. And neurons, they respond adaptively by increasing mitochondria, which in turn helps to produce more energy. So it has been shown by increasing the number of mitochondria neurons, it can increase the ability of new neurons to form and maintain those synapses. And then it increases your learning, memory ability, and also your focus. So think of it from a different perspective. And when you're focused on getting your food because you're hungry, really, you're not really worried about what people think about you, or what your Facebook feed is every 20 minutes, or what people are saying about you, right? This is not your focus. What happens is you start suddenly it's almost like you become a human being on a mission to find that food. But the difference is, since you know you can have that food, you can use this for clues to something that is really, really important to you at that time that you're going to do, because you have more mental clarity and energy. So really, since there is a similarity between how cells respond to the stress of exercise and how cells respond to fasting, basically think about the stress like when you go to the gym, you do your exercise, and then you give your body a break, right? It needs some time to recover, and it will recover, and that is and so that you get stronger. And that is the same thing that happens to your cells. There is some conditions, or there is some of you might be not in a position to do it because of various reasons. We're going to talk about that. So first, we're going to into the red light zone. Absolute no for intermittent fasting at this point in time. Okay, so let's say you're new to a diet and exercise. So intermittent fasting might really might look like a magic bullet for weight loss, but you'll be a lot smarter to address any kind of nutritional deficiencies before you start experimenting with fasting. So ensure you're starting from a solid nutritional platform first, okay? As well, pregnant women, they do have extra energy needs. As well, for the women that are planning families, this is not a time to fast for you as well. And as well, if you're under chronic stress, or if you're under chronic, if you're not sleeping, your body needs nurturing, not additional stress in that particular incident. And I'm saying this is just for now, because these things could be taken care of so that you can have that approach of fasting. Let's say you're struggling with disordered eating, or you have in the past, you probably recognize that a fasting protocol could lead you maybe down to a path that might create further problems for you. And you really don't want to mess with your health at that point in time, because you can have or achieve similar benefits in other ways. Or let's say you are on certain medication, or you suffer from certain health conditions. Again, this has to be cleared. It has to be taken care of before you can start fasting, okay? So now we're going into the yellow light, which talks about considering. What if you are considering this is possibly right for you? You're married, you have children, you need to consider, is this something that I can do with having to be able to take care of a family, right? You have performance-oriented or client-facing jobs. Another thing that you want to consider if this is something that might prevent your performance. You compete in sports athletics. Again, you need to consider that. There is some high competing athletes that are doing intermittent fasting, and they are doing really well, but this needs to be considered. So that's why intermittent fasting, yellow light, proceed with caution. You're an adult female, again, you want to caution because females do respond differently than males do to intermittent fasting, especially with our reproductive hormones and such factors. Also, you definitely can consider if you're under supervision from a nutrition coach. So here are some of the factors where you want to kind of think about it. Now we have the green light. Absolutely, yes, go for it. Intermittent fasting, green light. If you have a history of monitoring calorie and food intake, for example, so you have dieted before, so you have some experience. You are an experienced exerciser. What if you're single or you don't have children? Nothing stands in the way. You're basically free to create your nutrition plan the way it will benefit your goals. What if your partner, very supportive and stands right behind you? Your job allows you to have a period of low performance while you adapt to a new plan, because of course we're starting something new. Your body might react in different ways. No history of medical condition and approved by physician, or you're working with a nutrition coach. These are all factors that are giving us an absolute green light, okay? What now? Now we have all this information about intermittent fasting, what happens between the difference between time-restricted eating, intermittent fasting. So time-restricted eating, little less science, intermittent fasting, prolonged fasting, 24 hours plus, more science. So TRE, a little bit more focused on weight loss and calorie restriction. Intermittent prolonged fasting, more into using it as a tool, encourages higher calories, and is a little bit more goes into scientific approaches. So if you look at your own life right now, are you looking for more energy in your 40s upward? Are you at some point an empty nester? And that can come in many, many different forms. You could be going through a separation. Your children might be leaving home. You might be a widow because of a loved one died. So there's many, many forms of empty nesting. Have you, or are you experiencing that right now? Are you frustrated by past failures? Is that something you have tried many things, but you have fallen always back to your old ways and nothing has really stuck with you? Are you unsure why you can't lose the weight that you are trying to lose? Are you ready to sail into retirement or traveling, picking up your grandchildren, having the strength that you need to be able to keep up with them? Are you confused about how and where to start this healthy path so that you can achieve the longevity and the energy that you really need as you approach higher age? Are you excited about feeling just awesome while getting older? And that is some questions you really want to ask yourself, because that's where I come in as a certified holistic weight loss coach, expert in nutrition, and as well an online personal trainer. That is what I do. That is what I help people with, to find and to get to their ultimate goal, to go from A to B, finish that journey and stick with it. That is what it ultimately comes down to. And I just had this really, really beautiful testimonial coming in, and I thought I would share that with you. It says, "Hi friends, I just want to share my happy dance with you. So far I lost 6 inches in about a month. I'm excited," she says. She fits into her clothes she hasn't worn in a long time. And she is, and that's what I do with my one-on-one clients. I figure out what their specific needs are, and it comes down to nutrition. It might be vegan, it might be vegetarian, it might be food sensitivities, it might be different issues that you're suffering with, but you still want to enjoy the foods that you want to you still want to eat good. You don't want to deprive yourself of all of so many good foods, right? But there are certain ways that we can really track if you are getting enough proteins, low glycemic carbohydrates, if you're getting enough healthy fats, if you're getting enough fiber. We really want to make sure we track all that. And that is what I do with my one-on-one clients. We track and we analyze and we tweak and we make it work so that you get where you want to be, so you can really feel the way you want to feel for a very, very long time. I also work with certain supplements that are all very beneficial and helpful in every individual, with every individual person. So I just feel so excited about working with so many different wonderful ladies that are having the success and that are really feeling that they can do it and finally step out of that rut of not getting that satisfying feeling of really feeling good. So there is there it is. I really encourage you, if you would like to know more about my one-on-one coaching, then leave yes I am ready in the comment box and I will contact you. We can have a chat. I will set up a video call with you. I will send you my calendar, set up a video call one-on-one and talk about your individual need. I am right now, I have openings for 2, and I know it's a little bit limited, but for two ladies that are going to be working with me one-on-one, and I am taking applications for those. So anyone that is ready, yes, I am ready. I will send you a questionnaire for you to fill out, and based on that questionnaire, then I will filter out who would be best candidate to work with me one-on-one to get back what you have lost a long time ago.